In a historic move, Australia is stepping into a new era of global trade, marking a monumental milestone with the signing of two large free trade deals. Australia has entered its involvement with global trade as part of a group of 15 countries generating nearly a third of global economic output, has signed the world's largest ever free trade deal. This historic agreement will have economic implications far beyond the region's borders and signals a seismic geopolitical shift, not only for the countries that are part of the deal, but also for those that aren't. The RCEP, or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, will, upon ratification, create a trading bloc rivaling the European Union and US-Mexico-Canada Agreement. 10 of its members form the Association of East Asian Nations, ASEAN. The remaining 5 countries are Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, and most notably China. This free trade deal covers a market of 2.2 billion people, around a third of the world's population. Its members are responsible for 26.2 trillion in economic output, accounting for roughly 24% of global GDP. While RCEP is the latest in a long line of trade agreements emerging from Asia, it wasn't intended to be the biggest. Negotiations for the RCEP trade deal began in 2013, but gained renewed momentum in 2017 when President Donald Trump pulled the US out of a rival Asia-Pacific grouping, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. The TPP originated as a US-led initiative to establish high-standard trade rules across Pacific Rim nations, focusing on reducing tariffs, improving labor and environmental standards, and fostering digital trade. However, the US withdrawal under President Trump in 2017, citing his concerns about domestic industry and sovereignty, marked a turning point. The remaining 11 countries renegotiated and created the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP, which took effect in 2018. Australia played a pivotal role in this transition, with the CPTPP evolving into a significant trade bloc encompassing nations like Japan, Canada, Vietnam, and more recently, the UK. By 2024, its GDP has excessed over $21 trillion. While both the RCEP and CPTPP aim to create free and open markets, their objectives differ significantly. The CPTPP enforces high standards on labor, human rights, and environmental protections. This agreement also helps diversify Australia's trade relationships, reducing reliance on any single country while offering a stable, rule-based trading environment. RCEP emphasizes tariffs, streamlining trade processes, and strengthening supply chains. However, analysts suggest that RCEP's economic benefits are limited and could take decades to materialize, given that many members already benefit from bilateral trade agreements and reduced tariffs. One of RCEP's most significant features is its new rules of origin, which officially determine where a product is made. Those rules are set to eliminate around 90% of tariffs on goods traded between member states, simplifying trade compared to bilateral free trade agreements, especially for companies with global supply chains. RCEP removes such barriers, incentivizing members to source within their bloc. This focus on supply chain integration offers opportunities for industries like manufacturing to benefit, while CPTPP enhances market access for high-value Australian exports such as beef, wine, and dairy, particularly in Japan, Canada, and the UK, aligning with its emphasis on stringent standards for trade. The trade deal also sets the stage for stronger economic partnerships in the future, particularly among countries without existing free trade agreements, such as China, Japan, and South Korea. These 3 East Asian nations have been negotiating a free trade deal since 2002 without success, but RCEP could pave the way for collaboration. Despite political relations between China and nations like Australia, they have signed the deal. For China, RCEP is in its first multilateral free trade agreement, a political and economic victory. It comes at a time of heightened tension between the US and China, Without US involvement, China could sidestep pressure for major economic reforms or changes to intellectual property rights. Conversely, CPTPP acts as a Western-aligned counterbalance. Its expansion through the UK's accession in 2024 has broadened its geopolitical reach, extending beyond the Indo-Pacific. This duality underscores a strategy division. RCEP integrates fast-growing Asian economies like Indonesia and Vietnam under China's influence, while CPTPP promotes Western trade values and standards. To fully harness the potential of both the CPTPP and RCEP, Australian policymakers must adopt a multifaceted approach that balances competitiveness, sustainability, and strategic diversification. First, enhancing the competitiveness of Australian industries is paramount. This includes investigating in key infrastructure, such as modernising ports and upgrading logistics networks to streamline the export process. Small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, should also be supported to ensure they can tap into the opportunity presented by both agreements. Export grants, training programs, and digital platforms can help SMEs navigate the complexities of international markets, particularly in agriculture and manufacturing, which are among the most impacted by these agreements. In tandem with strengthening competitiveness, Australia must commit to advancing environmental sustainability within these trade frameworks. As a signatory of the CPTPP, which emphasises high standards on labour and environmental protections, Australia can advocate for stronger environmental clauses in future trade negotiations. This would allow Australia to set global benchmarks for sustainable trade while aligning trade policies with domestic environmental objectives. Moreover, Australia's influence within RCEP provides an opportunity to encourage the adoption of more rigorous environmental standards, particularly given the growing demand for sustainable practices in regional supply chains. Monitoring the implementation of these trade agreements is crucial to ensuring that Australian industries are truly benefiting. Policymakers should establish mechanisms to evaluate the agreement's impact on domestic industries, employment, and economic growth. By identifying any gaps, unintended consequences, targeted interventions can be made to address vulnerabilities, such as support programs for industries facing competitive pressures or restraining initiatives for displaced workers. This oversight would ensure that trade agreements deliver equitable benefits across all sectors of the economy. So what do you think is next for Australia as it navigates the opportunities and challenges of these transformative trade agreements? Thank you.